Now that we're adding more and more styles, this style element here is getting bigger and bigger in this HTML document. Of course, I'm also zoomed in quite a bit here to make the code more readable, but even if I zoom out a bit temporarily, you see this is getting longer and longer, and especially this style part is growing and growing. And that's not bad, that's totally normal. But it's also therefore totally normal that we want to outsource this into a separate file. That we want to put our style definitions into a separate file, which we then just add and merge into this file, so to say. And that is something which is officially supported by browsers and by HTML. We can create a new file here by clicking on this icon or using the new file shortcut, and then give this file a name of our choice, for example, daily-challenge.css. We could also name it styles.css or site.css, whatever we want, but I'll stick to daily-challenge.css. And now this file has to end with .css, and when it ends like that, you can put your CSS code right into that file. So we can go to index.html and grab all that CSS code here between the style tags, without the style tags though. So just the code itself, the CSS code itself, cut it and add it here in daily challenge CSS. Now if we do this, and I save all files, if I reload, the styles are lost. Just because we added an extra file does not mean that this file gets used by the browser. The browser still only loads the HTML file, and in this file we have no reference to that extra CSS file. Just because it lives in the same directory does not mean that the browser automatically applies it. Instead, we explicitly have to state that we want to use this CSS file for styling the elements in this HTML file. And we do this with help of another meta HTML element. Not the style element, but instead the link element. The link element is added like this, and the special thing about the link element is that it has no closing element, no closing tag. Instead, this is a so-called void element because it actually has no content between the opening and closing tag, and hence there is no closing tag. Instead, such void elements, like the link element is, are configured with attributes only. And we don't have a lot of void elements, but there are a few, and they are always void because they just don't need any content between the tags. Instead here, link is configured with attributes only, and the attribute which it needs is the ref attribute. Just like the anchor tag had a ref attribute. But link does something different, and it can be easy to confuse those two because link also sounds like it would create a link which we could click, but that's not what happens. Instead, it creates a link to another file which will then be included or which will be used when this file is being parsed by the browser as well. So it links this HTML file to another file, and then both files together will be evaluated and parsed by the browser. It does not create a clickable link. So it's really just some random fact that link also has an attribute called href for defining a path to the file this HTML file should be linked to. And to be precise, it can be a relative path, so seen relative from this HTML file, and therefore since daily challenge CSS is a sibling file to this index.html file, we can just specify this daily-challenge.css file name as a value for href here, and that will then link this HTML file to this CSS file. Now there's just one other extra attribute which we have to add, and that's the rel attribute. That defines the kind of relationship we're creating here with this link, and here we should set the value to style sheet. telling the browser that what we import here will be a file full of CSS style definitions. You could argue that this is clear because of the file extension, but the browser doesn't look at the extension and then guess what should be in the file. Instead, you have to explicitly set this kind of relation. Though I will say right away that this is the most common type of link you'll create, a link to another style sheet. But we'll see other ways of importing other files into this HTML file a little bit later in the course. So this now creates a link to this style sheet and ensures that those styles will be used when this HTML file is being parsed by the browser. So if we now save this and reload, we got our styles back. But now they live in a separate file, and therefore we're back to a more readable and more manageable HTML file. And as a developer, that's always our goal. We want to keep our code maintainable and manageable. And of course, for bigger websites, it will grow automatically. It will become bigger and bigger, but especially outsourcing non-HTML content like CSS rules into a separate file is a good and common practice which you should consider using for your websites and your styles on your websites as well.